Hello my lovelies and welcome back to Kickback Garage. This video we're going to be talking about the difference between a touring expansion and a clubman exhaust. So if that's something you fancy having a watch of, then grab the old coffee, I'll roll the intro. Whap! Messing around with these cameras, batteries going flat.
Markerte det med regn. Alle sprang I lag og ville komme under tak. Ingen av oss merket at du hadde falt I frak. Hvorfor valgte du å dra? Hvem I faen kunne se den komme? Da høsten tok over, sa vi hadde brattet oss sommer.
So, as you see, today I am outside the garage in this lovely June weather. Finally, I know you guys in the UK have had terrible weather as well. Anyway, I'm not talking about the weather. What I'm going to tell you about today is the difference between a touring expansion exhaust and the clubman, which is the Avanti Xbox ST. Now, I've been doing lots of back-to-back rides with these over the last couple of weeks to try and give myself an impression of how different they behave. And before I tell you about how they do behave, I want to go through the specs a little bit. Now, in the red corner over there, we have the Series 1 that has a SIL engine block. It has LTH clutch. It's got MB 5-speed. I'm running a 4.4 primary, which is quite tall. It's got MB tuned RT cylinder with a reed valve. It's running a PHBH 30, and on that at the moment I have got the CST, it's my neighbour, sorry about that, the CST Chiselspeed CST3 touring expansion exhaust pipe. The specs on the green one here are, it's got the casket case, but it is running the same LTH clutch. It's running Cyclone 5 speed gearbox. It's got the RT tune cylinder from Mark Broadhurst with the reed valve, exactly the same as the other one. It's also running a 30 PHBH carb, and it has the Avanti Xbox ST, which is a clubman pipe. So the base for this is really good, really, because it's basically the same machine. The only difference is on the Series 2 here, I am running a 62 stroke crankshaft, and on the Series 1 I'm running a 60 crankshaft. So this is a real 240, and that's what's 235. The 5cc extra isn't really going to give you, in theory it should give me a little bit more torque, but it's more for bragging rights down the pub, basically, the long stroke. There's not much difference between the 60 stroke and 62 stroke. So how do these things perform compared to each other? Right, so what I want to say before I go into the nitty-gritty of how these things compare to each other, it's really important to remember what top end you've got on your scooter before you choose your exhaust pipe. Now, both the exhaust pipes on these scooters are both made for, what can I say, slightly bigger engines, and none of them are very high revving, and they're both tuned for torque. So that would bottom end punch, if you will. So it'd be no point in me grabbing something like a JL4 or whatever what they call JL5, you know, the really, really fast expansion pipes, because of the way the cylinder is set up, the port timings and the port durations. I'm not going to go too far into detail there, but these kits aren't revvy kits by nature because of where the ports are. Now, if I threw a racing pipe on these, all I'd successfully do is take away all the bottom end grunt and turn it quite peaky, but it won't rev past 8,000 revs anyway because of the port timing durations on these. So it's really important to have a look at what sort of tune you have on your scooter and choose the exhaust from there. Now, if you've got a standard scooter or a standard-ish scooter, say like a BGM 195 or a Magello or something like that, there's not really a lot of point putting a peak expansion port on there, because what you'll find you have to do is go for much lower gearing or tighter gearing, and you just kill the top end speed on these. Now, as these two are set up as they are with the 4.4 primary, what that means is that I can cruise about 95 to 100 kilometers an hour, around 5,500 to 6,000 revs, and that's really nice on the motorways and long journeys. But if you're a bit of a hooligan and you want to rev the tits off them, then just bear in mind that you have to lower your gearing, and you're going to have to chase the gears a lot more than I have to do on these two beauties here. Now I want to tell you a little bit about how the Avanti Xbox ST works. Can you see it under there, can you? Got the little end pipe. Now Ron Moss of Avanti, he makes two types of exhausts. One of them is a standard sort of Clubman with baffles in the Clubman, and the reason why I've got the little end pipe on this is that this is pretty much baffleless, so you've got to put an end pipe on there just to dampen the sound. When it comes to the sound, it's quite loud, a little bit more noise than for as an example, maybe the BGM V4, probably on par with the V2 and V1. It's not quite expansion noise. It's still got that nice Lambretta sound. If you want to hear how this sounds, then I'll put a link in the corner somewhere of the startup of this, so you can have a little bit of a listen. I just have to touch my camera there. I get completely confused when I can't see myself in the screen. Anyway, so what this exhaust does is it gives a very, very linear power delivery. Now, the advantage of the linear power delivery, apart from the fact that you've got quite a bit of torque low down, is the fact that it's very easy to jet in. The first ride I had on this, I was messing around with the jets. It was pretty cold. It's quite warm today, 20 degrees. I've been for a ride today, and the jets are spot on. So it's a lot easier if you don't have these peaks or surges of power that suddenly come. Then it's a lot more predictable and a lot easier to set up your carb. So that's something to take note of as well. So the interesting thing about this exhaust is it, I'm going to say, it dumbs it down a little bit, the scooter. It's not got masses of torque at the lower end. It doesn't feel that way anyway. And this is Sebastian, my son, Shrek. He likes it. He sees why I likes it. But for him, a two-stroke has got to be a little bit more peaky and a little bit more exciting, because what this exhaust does is turn your machine almost into a four-stroke, or almost into a standard scooter, you know, back in the day, because they weren't peaky either. The nice thing about that is that it doesn't seem to matter where I am in the rev range when I change gear. I really don't have to wang on the throttle to try and get myself in some sort of power band, because the power's always there. Now, when I say it's not peaky, it doesn't like sort of rev right out, give me a massive power surge. It just sort of, how can I explain that? It's sort of just like revs in more of a sort of a natural four-stroke type of manner. And I can rev it out all the way up on my rev counter. I've had 8,200 revs on it, and I think that is down to my port timings. I think if you put this exhaust on something like a Quattrini, for example, or even a TS1, I reckon it would rev out a little bit more. So that's pretty cool. So it's free revving. Because of the nature of the power delivery, this really does suit touring, going on rallies, riding with mates, that sort of stuff, because it's very easy to live with around town. It's got usable power almost through the whole rev range. I can back it down all the way to about 3,000 revs, on the hills, and I can just wind on the throttle and it just picks up nicely. I think it turns it into a really beautiful ride. Now the interesting thing is I saw a test of, I think it was Daryl Taylor who mentioned that he had on one setup he had a BGM V4 and he put the Avanti on and didn't see any difference. Now the reason for that really is, like I said, is if you've got lower port timings that are more suited for touring, then you're not really going to get much more power out of this exhaust. So I reckon after riding this and the Chiselspeed back to back, I reckon this probably may lose a couple of horsepower throughout the whole rev range, but the rev range is longer. So keep that in mind, and I'll talk to you about the Chiselspeed CST3. Right, so I'm going to tell you briefly about the CST3. It's an excellent exhaust. It is a proper full-blown expansion exhaust. Let me touch my screen again. There we go. Hello. I think I'm going to have to set that to on all the time. It's a full-blown expansion exhaust, but it's aimed at a touring setup. So if you've got a really, really peaky motor, I mean, I've used one of these on a TS1, and I've also used this exhaust pipe on my SS240, which is quite a peaky engine. It calms the engine down a little bit. You do have that sudden surge of power, like my son likes on the two-stroke there. The problem being, it stops at around 7,200 RPM. So this revs a lot less than the Avanti does. So what we did, me and Shrek, we have done some testing. We have done stuff like traffic light Grand Prix. We'll see who gets away fastest, and this one wins fastest every time. And the reason for that is because the power comes on a lot stronger, a lot quicker. I won't say earlier, but it does have a peak, but it peaks up to around 3,500-4,000 revs, and then you get a bit of a delay, and then it shoots up, probably up to the 20 horsepower mark somewhere. Around 6,008, 7,000. You come to 7,000, then it just completely doesn't want to have anymore. It just makes a horrible noise and nothing happens. So you have to change gear. Now, what we found in the hills is that even though I'm a bit of a porker, is that he'll sort of start shooting up the hill, and then he changes gear, and then I fly past him on the Avanti without having to change gear. The nice thing about having the 5-speed gearbox in this is that when he changes gear, the gears are a lot closer. So when he changes gear, he drops into the trough just before the power band, so it doesn't feel that little bit of a delay. Now the delay, I've seen that a lot on dyno graphs with people that have got the CST3 exhaust, and I think it's just because of the design of the CST3. You can try and what am I going to say? Trying to con it a little bit by adjusting jets and stuff like that. But I've been all over the place on the jets on this, and that's an inherent sort of trait of expansion pipe that it can be a little bit more tricky to jet in because you've got this power band. So all in all, on the road, this is the CST3 turns this scooter into a little bit more fun than the other one. My son is definitely he doesn't complain that he has to change gear more often, because he prefers that style of riding. So he's almost just as quick as me, but when we hit fifth gear and comes up to that barrier at 7,000 revs, then the Avanti flies past again, because it's got a very useful bit of over rev on there. And what I mean by over rev is you sort of hit the peak power, but it holds it a short while, probably between, as I'll hazard a guess, somewhere between 7,800 RPM up to about 8,500 RPM. So it does get past him in the end. And the Avanti is a much more leisurely ride on the hills, where he has to chase the gears a little bit more. And that's even though that we've got the same quite tall primary on these two, or final drive on these two scooters. So what I reckon is, if I was gonna ride around, have a bit of fun with your mates, then I'd definitely grab the Series 1. If I am gonna go touring, traveling, putting lots of gear on my scooter, lots of weight, then I'd definitely go for the Series 2 with the Avanti ST, Xbox ST. I really, really love that exhaust. And it's another big difference between these is the sound. The Chiselspeed CST3, it makes quite the racket. And if you've got sensitive ears, then this is probably not the exhaust pipe for you. Now, especially due to the fact that on this scooter I have the CST3 curly. Now, if you fancy having a go with the CST3 and your top end kit will suit the touring nature of the exhaust, it gives bags of torque. I reckon probably quite a few more torques earlier down on this one, because it really does take off like a rocket before it stops. So if you want to try one of these exhausts, then I'd highly recommend going for the standard type CST3 and not the curly. I've had all sorts of problems with this when it comes to ground clearance issues. It's been scraping, even with my son who weighs like 60 kilos. The Encan grinds on speed bumps and corners and all sorts of stuff. So we've had all sorts of problems with that. And I've actually had to jack up the rear end by fitting a 315 shock. And I've also fit the offset cones so that I can angle the engine so that it lifts the exhaust up for a little bit more clearance. It doesn't go down as often as it used to, but there's a big scrape mark under the tailpipe there, which is a little bit annoying. And especially due to the fact that when I phoned the guys at Chiselspeed, I asked them if there was clearance issues, because curlies in general have often clearance issues when it comes to the road clearance. And they said there was no problem, which is it's a blatant lie, really. So yeah, so so buy the standard type CST3. Another thing I want to talk about is fitment. Both these exhausts fit fine, no problems whatsoever. There is a little bit of a problem with the Chiselspeed CST3 when it comes to if you're one of those push kits and have a Casa side case, then they build out a little bit more. So it's quite tricky. I had to shim it out and mess around with that when I had that exhaust on my Series 2 here with the SS240. And the Avanti, you can see me fitting that. I've got a video somewhere. I'll see if I can throw up a link again of the fitment. Fit and finish on that is excellent, just as good as on the CST3. But because of the way the exhaust flange manifold is made, it allowed me to pull that out a little bit, and it clears my Casa case a lot better. Probably the best on the market for for that application, to tell you the truth. And I know for a fact that Casa Performance, they're going to try and get hold of one of these exhausts and try it on their SST engine. That'd be really interesting to see how that goes, because this Clubman actually lets the revs go a little bit further than on a standard type Clubman. That could quite suit that engine, I reckon. So it'd be really interesting to see. So, like I said, before you go out, run out and buy yourself the reviest pipe on the market for your engine, it's not really going to make a massive difference if you've got sort of a standard tuned engine. The only thing you're going to do is hurt the bottom range, because what happens with typically with expansion pipes is you only can really choose, like on the CST3, they've got a really nice low to mid range. but then, as I said, it stops dead at about 7,500 RPM. You can have a really nice mid to high range, or you can have a really nice high range. The problem with that is it sort of kills. If you've got a low range pipe, it's going to kill the top end. If you've got a mid-range pipe, it'll make a nice all-rounder, but it won't make the same peak power as the race pipe. The race pipe, on the other hand, is going to be a real pig in town, because the only way you're going to be able to push that scooter forwards is by pulling it right up into the rev range, and you get this really sort of peak where it just wants to take off, and it just makes town riding a little bit difficult. And yeah, so try and think about what sort of riding you do, what sort of top end you have, and what sort of gearing you have before you choose which exhaust you want to go for. Basically, if you've got an RT195, then at the moment the BGM Clubman is probably the best exhaust for the job there. You could have success with the Chiselspeed CST3 or even the Avanti, but I reckon the Avanti, it's not going to do much at the bottom end. You'd probably lose some bottom end power, but it gives you the ability to rev on. But if you've got a kit that won't rev on anyway because of the port timings, then it's going to be a bit of a waste, really, to tell you the truth. So look at your kit. Look at the whole package, look at your gearing, look at what you do before you go out and buy or sell an expansion pipe. So the reason why I've wanted to talk about these two is I've got some really exciting news. And that is because of the issues I've had with the clearance issues I've had with the CST3 there, I've got hold of the new, what do they call it? Racebox, BGM's new Clubman, which is also a super Clubman with a small end pipe. It looks very much like the one that the box pipe that the boys Rimini Lambretta make, where it sort of curls up on itself. But anyway, when that arrives, I will be fitting that on the Series 1, taking off the CST3. I'll give it a couple of weeks, I'll jet it in, and we'll see how this Avanti ST Xbox compares to the new BGM exhaust, and that is going to be really, really interesting, because from what I remember of what I've used the BGM version 4 Clubman pipe for, I remember that was quite torquey as well. The power delivery came in quite early on that as well, so it'd be really interesting to see if it has the same sort of characteristics as the CST3. Maybe it will allow it to rev on slightly longer, and maybe we get rid of that sort of static dip at around 3,500 revs, so it'll be a lot easier to jet in. So exciting times. Don't forget, if you find this stuff interesting, you can support the channel by buying merch. My son is coming, so I have to be quick. That thing is really, really loud. And you can support the channel by buying merch, or you can simply buy me a coffee and have a nice summer. Let's hope it's better than the last one. See you all later. Ta-ra! Messing around with these cameras, batteries going flat.
Markerte det med regn. Alle sprang I lag og ville komme under tak. Ingen av oss merket at du hadde falt I frak. Hvorfor valgte du å dra? Hvem I faen kunne se den komme? Da høsten tok over, sa vi ja, det bra til la oss sommer.